As I get older, I'm watching more and more historical dramas. Maybe it's nostalgia, maybe it's because as the world is changing faster and faster, I'm looking for stories that feel grounded, like they're rooted in some inextricable truth about the human condition, which keeps them relevant. Of course, looking for timeless truths in Hollywood productions is a dicey prospect, bordering on idiotic. I mean, they're movies. And even if they're movies about true events, we all understand that a filmmaker has to sacrifice accuracy for drama. Some details about the old world are simply too confusing or take up too much time to establish for the writer to bother with them. When it comes to a timeline of events, they may need to be shortened to fit within the screen time, or sometimes wholly altered for thematic punch. I've been thinking a lot about this spectrum. Like, we all recognize the reason for pushing in this direction. Like, we're all equally annoyed with the guy who says, actually, Marcus Aurelius died of natural causes. Just like in a sci-fi film, we're all equally annoyed with this guy.
You can't thump sand. If you do this to sand, nobody else is going to hear it because it's sand.
So why do we care about accuracy to begin with? Like, what is the value as a storyteller in struggling to preserve the facts? Some filmmakers would say none, that history is little more than mise-en-scène, flavorful dressing around the story, as interchangeable as costumes in Macbeth. Yet, a lot of my favorites in the genre stay pretty faithful to their source material. At the very least, these esoteric bits of history they retain have a provocative strangeness that draws the viewer in. They make for a setting that feels truly lived in, richly detailed, with its own logic that is external to the screenwriter's immediate needs. The greatest of these movies, though, go further. They perform this sort of black magic, where there isn't just a trade between authenticity and drama, it's like the authenticity creates the drama. Rob Roy, from 1995, is one of the many forgotten twin films that was outshone by its sibling, in this case, Braveheart, that came out the same year. And while it isn't a perfect movie, it's a really solid film that exemplifies what I'm talking about. Specifically, it's willing to set up this convoluted 18th century financial dispute, the seemingly dry details of which don't just add flavor, they're the lifeblood of the whole movie. I want to talk about how the film achieves this, so let me quickly summarize the exposition. Rob Roy is the chief of Clan MacGregor, whose primary source of income is a cattle watch. Basically, they're just 18th century cowboys, but with way cooler looking cows. At the opening of the film, we see that times are tough, the clan is poor, and Rob isn't even sure if they can survive the winter. So he hatches a plan. He's going to borrow £1,000 from the Duke of Montrose. Then he's going to travel to Crieff, buy a herd, and then drive them slowly back home and fatten them up along the way. Once he's home, he can sell them for a profit, repay Montrose with interest, and then have enough money left over to feed his clan during the winter. There are two important points here. The first is that the agreement isn't for cash, but for a note of credit, which they can use to get cash at Crieff. The second is that in order to secure this loan, Rob has to put up the MacGregor's lands as collateral. Let me say, a lot of this film is about class. It's about how the poor have to risk everything to survive, but the rich need to only risk fractional wealth to acquire more wealth. When Rob makes his proposition to the Duke of Montrose, there's this fundamental disconnect between them and how they view the world. The English lord assumes that Rob must be
a man of property intent on growing richer. Well, we have more in common than I would have suspected, MacGregor.
It could never occur to him that Rob is motivated out of loyalty to his clan, which is built on familial bonds. In Montrose's eyes, the clan members are servants to be exploited, not blood relations to be protected. Anyways, they strike a deal. Rob goes to a nearby inn with Killern, who's Montrose's servant, and his friend Alan, who wants to immigrate to America. They draw up some papers, and Rob heads home while Alan waits for the note of credit to be signed. Killern then stalls Alan and sneaks away to scheme with Archibald Cunningham, who the film has already established as an excellent fencer and a spendthrift.
Some of the local tradespeople have been pressing for payment on your debt.
This tailor in Glasgow, to whom you owe £87, extended this credit because you were my guest.
Killern tells Archibald about this exchange of £1,000 that's about to occur, and how they can steal the money for themselves while pinning the blame on the McGregors. If this feels like a lot of setup and a lot of characters, you're not wrong. Screenwriters generally agree that the exposition should be finished in 30 minutes, meaning you've established the setting, introduced the characters, built up the central conflict, and set it in motion within the first 30 pages of your script. This is challenging with any film, but it's hard to convey just how much of a squeeze this is when working with science fiction or history. There's this entire world you have to establish while keeping the action moving. You're contriving these conversations between characters where they discuss things they already know for the benefit of the audience.
So you're going to Arrakis tomorrow with the advanced team?
Yes, I'm going to Arrakis tomorrow with the advanced team.
You're trying to condense every event into its most concise version possible to save screen time. Little details, like the ones about this cattle transaction, are a burden.
Not coin. A note of credit drawn on his lordship.
£1,000 for 3 months, you say, and these acres of yours as security.
I'm to wait here till the note is signed.
When reviewing the historical record, a writer would be tempted to cut some of them. Let's just say the agreement is for £1,000 cash and leave it at that. But instead, screenwriter Alan Sharp builds this thorough 42-minute mega first act, which only now starts to pay off with moments like this.
His lordship is to Edinburgh for the assize, then to London direct. Great doings at the court. And he's away without signing the note. The best I can do for you is coin.
Immediately, we're getting 2 points of tension. Is Alan going to fall for this? And is he maybe going to be tempted by the money, betray Rob, and abscond off to America?
This was not agreed.
Note that this is also really rich character building for Killern, because just look at what a great liar he is.
Agreed, I know there's £1,000 here. Take it or leave it, it makes no difference to me, nor to his grace.
Watch him manipulate Alan into taking this sack of cash.
It's a terrible shock. The sight of such a fortune within reach, is it not? It's just as well you have the trust of the McGregor, or I'd be hard-pressed to sign it over to you.
It also builds up Alan to be more than some side character errand boy. As he passes the turnoff for the harbor, we watch as he briefly wrestles in himself, but remains loyal to the clan. Even Archibald, who's lying in wait to ambush and kill him, notes this.
For a moment there, I thought you might take the road to Greenock with your £1,000.
Now, this is a tense chase scene, and it's not due to fancy choreography. There's no sword fighting on horseback or leaping over trees. There's just very concrete stakes. Alan is carrying the future of Clan McGregor under his jacket, and he's being hunted down. Screenwriters joke about a MacGuffin. It's like an object that propels the plot, but feels somehow arbitrary. It's like the pursuit of the thing is more important than the thing itself. Sometimes the MacGuffin is injected with all these huge consequences to try to make it feel more meaningful. If we don't bring the golden floopy schnoop to the altar, then the whole universe is going to end. This can feel unsatisfying, hollow. I think we as an audience detect when a fictional world distorts and conforms to its writer's needs. By contrast, the 1,000 Scotch pounds at the center of this plot have very straightforward ramifications for everyone involved. If the McGregors lose this money, they'll be starving and they'll be homeless. Alan's murder is one of my favorite scenes of all time. Archibald's casual body language, indicating that he's killed before, his prissy costume, a reminder of the extravagances this robbery will fund, Alan's last-ditch effort to hide the money, and Archibald's insistence after stabbing him that he see his failure. It's the poor against the rich, how too often the world seems to punish virtue, but reward ruthlessness. It all feels somehow timeless and deeply true.
He sat out there all day pondering on this.
You gave him coin.
He insisted upon it. When I told him his grace had not signed the note, he said, "You must have it, or the beast could not be bought at the best price."
Again, there's a specificity to this movie, where characters and their choices feel multidimensional. Killern isn't just detestable because he stole from Rob and killed his friend. He's detestable because he causes Rob to doubt the loyalty of that friend, who just died for him. His lies are corrosive, attacking the bonds of trust that hold the clan together. This in turn makes Rob a more compelling hero later when he refuses to give in to that doubt, despite everyone else around him doing so.
Hey, spoke of the Americas often enough.
Alan MacDonald did not betray me.
Keep up the watch for MacDonald.
Ah, Robbie's long gone.
Aye, but is he over the seas or under them?
Surprisingly, the only other person who smells something fishy is Montrose.
This was a ploy of McGregor's, to take the money and blame another. His man is well hid, and your lordship's money well spent. I wager it.
You have a rare grasp of the conspirator's mind, Archibald.
I think a lot of screenwriters would have been tempted to write Montrose as in on the scheme, staging the robbery to acquire the McGregor's lands. He is the big bad of the film, so to speak, and it would simplify things a lot. But instead we get this complex dog-eat-dog image of the British aristocracy, the cloak and dagger nature of which contrasts very nicely with the simplicity of the McGregor's clan system. It also provides another point of tension that keeps the audience guessing through the back half of this movie. Is Montrose going to discover that Archibald stole from him? And if he does, how's he going to act on it? Rob Roy is similar to The Fugitive in this way, where the antagonist has the potential to become a savior if only the facts were brought to light. This hope is gradually extinguished as Montrose shows disinterest in the truth. He offers to forgive Rob's debt if he'll bear false witness against the Duke of Argyll and label him as a Jacobite. More shit we established in the first act. And finally, even admits that he doesn't care about what happened to the money.
I care not what you and that greasy capon have cooked up, but put an end to this impudence against me.
This film is about integrity. It's about Rob's attempt to maintain his principles under impossible circumstances, and how his struggles mirror the collapse of the Scottish clan system. Again, I don't think Rob Roy is a perfect movie, and I don't intend this as a philippic against historically inaccurate movies. I mean, some of my favorite movies don't give a shit about being accurate. But I do think these kinds of grounded films, ones where the story seems to bubble up out of a complete world, are harder to find. I think they're the result of a less common creative process, one that's driven more by research than invention. Personally, I think history has this addictive quality of being both alien and familiar. Stories from 2,000 years ago come from an environment so fundamentally different that it throws the relatable elements into relief. There's a certain kind of writer who loves these strange details. They're integral to the whole romance of history. Much like a hard sci-fi author whose inspiration is hopelessly bound up in how mech suits would work and how time dilation would be perceived. And I like those writers. I'm gravitated towards those storytellers who have this obsessive love for the record. Anyways, I've included a list of movies that I think fall into this hard history category. If you have any others, please let me know.